Hey guys, tonight we slip into the candlelit halls of history, where the sands of time whisper stories older than the walls around you. You're about to drift into the world of Alexander the Great. Except, relax, I'm not throwing you straight into a battlefield just yet. We'll start gentler, with a prince still fumbling with the laces of his sandals. Imagine a boy growing up in a palace, told almost daily that one day he might rule the world. No pressure, right? If it were you, you'd probably just want to play video games and eat chips. Honestly, you wouldn't last a week here. You'd be crushed by dawn philosophy lessons and wrestling drills before breakfast. You sure wouldn't survive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love picturing you tucked into your own corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander into Macedon, a rugged land of mountains and ambition, where kings are expected not only to wield swords, but also to wrestle with philosophy. In front of you is young Alexander, his hair a bright copper halo in the sun, his eyes glowing with curiosity. You hear the steady sandals of Aristotle pacing across marble floors, his voice smooth but relentless, layering astronomy, ethics, and biology all before lunchtime. Congratulations, you've just been dropped into the toughest classroom of the ancient world. No cute pop quizzes here, just the kind of questions that give even philosophers migraines. A breeze drifts through the palace garden, carrying the scent of pine and olive leaves. Birds chatter lazily while Aristotle unrolls a map, pointing to distant lands at the very edges of Greek imagination. Beyond here, he says, lies Asia. And you, sitting quietly in the corner like some invisible companion, feel the same mix Alexander feels, excitement and dread. It's the same sensation you get when your teacher announces a surprise oral exam. Your brain screams no, but your pulse leaps anyway. Aristotle performs his little demonstrations. He drops a stone into a still pool, watches the ripples spread outward. Ideas, he explains, move farther than these circles, touching even those who never see the stone. Alexander frowns, trying to absorb the meaning. You tilt your head too, thinking this could easily be printed on one of those inspirational Instagram posts that people like to screenshot. Yet, in Alexander's expression, you catch a glimmer of conviction. He's not just humoring the lesson, he's swallowing it whole, shaping it into destiny. Every night, Alexander curls up with a worn copy of Homer's Iliad, whispering the verses as though summoning the spirit of Achilles. You picture him under a blanket, candle flickering, just like you binge-watching a whole season on Netflix, even though you swore you'd only watch one episode. Achilles isn't just a hero to him, he's a blueprint, and you, shadowing him in the dark, hear the crisp crack of each page turn, feel the hunger burning hotter than the candle wax. But childhood here isn't all cozy reading. One day, Alexander watches his father, King Philip II, stumble back from battle, bloodied and half-broken. The air thickens, silence drops, and you can practically feel the palace itself holding its breath. It's a raw reminder, even kings are flesh, vulnerable, temporary. And you, standing at Alexander's side, can tell what he learns from it, that survival in this world means becoming sharper, harder, unshakable. Historians still debate whether Aristotle actually planted the dream of a universal empire in Alexander's head, or if that ambition was purely his own fevered creation. Either way, you sense it here, in these nights filled with verses and visions. Alexander whispering to himself, "One day, I'll surpass Achilles." The sun sets, painting the palace columns in gold. From the courtyard, you hear the clash of swords and the grunt of sparring soldiers. Alexander rises, setting his book aside, pulling his cloak tight. Tonight, he is still just a prince with too much homework. But you can already tell. The boy is gathering kindling for a fire that will soon consume the known world. Morning dew still clings to the grass outside the palace gates of Pella when you hear the commotion. A horse, massive, coal-black, eyes wild with fury, is being dragged into the yard. Foam flecks its mouth, its hooves strike sparks on the stones, and the handlers curse under their breath. The animal bucks and rears, a storm contained in muscle and bone. Soldiers gather in a loose circle, amused by the chaos, whispering that this beast is impossible, untamable. You find yourself among them, shifting on your feet, the kind of hush that falls before something either spectacular or disastrous. Then Alexander steps into the sunlight, still just a teenager, barely taller than the horse's shoulders, but his stride is measured, his gaze unwavering. The murmurs turn sharper. Some laugh outright. You hear one soldier say, "The boy who dreams of ruling the world can't even ride a horse." The crowd chuckles, the kind of laughter that stings. You glance at Philip II, the king, watching with folded arms and a skeptical frown. This is no ordinary horse. It's a test, and the whole kingdom seems to be holding its breath. Alexander doesn't rush. He circles the animal, eyes narrowed, studying not just its body, but its shadow. You notice it too now, how the horse shies whenever its own silhouette stretches before it. The great Bucephalus, though no one calls him that yet, terrified of nothing but darkness on the ground. Alexander laughs, a sharp sound against the tension. You don't see it? He calls, voice carrying, teasing the men twice his age. He fears his own shadow. You bite back a grin. It's the kind of insight that feels so obvious once someone says it, like noticing your Wi-Fi router was unplugged all along. With quiet confidence, Alexander grabs the bridle, gently but firmly turning the horse toward the sun. Suddenly, the shadow is tucked safely behind, and the beast calms, ears flicking in confusion. The crowd's noise dies down, as if the very air has thickened. You feel your own pulse quicken, standing there as if you too might be asked to climb on. Alexander strokes the neck, whispering something you can't catch, words carried only to the animal. Then, in one swift movement, he swings himself onto its back. The yard erupts in shouts, half warning, half awe. The horse bolts, hooves hammering, dust swirling in hot, dry clouds. You feel your chest thud as though you're galloping too, the rhythm pounding in your ears. Alexander leans low, guiding, coaxing, daring. Instead of being thrown, he bends with the motion, every line of his body in tune with the creature beneath him. Around and around the yard they fly, black and gold streaks under the sun, until suddenly the horse slows, not from exhaustion, but from trust. The silence that follows is almost heavier than the noise before. Philip's eyes glisten, and his voice breaks when he speaks. "Macedonia is too small for you, my son. You must find a kingdom worthy of you." You shiver, because it isn't just a father's pride. It's a prophecy, spoken aloud. Historians still debate whether this story unfolded exactly as the legends say. Was the horse truly that wild, or is the tale polished like marble to make Alexander shine brighter? But here, in this moment, you hear the men's awe, see the dust still settling, and watch the boys' grin split wide. Real or embellished, the truth is this: Bucephalus became his companion for life, a partner in war, and a symbol of the unbreakable bond between courage and vision. You linger as the crowd disperses, hearing fragments of laughter now tinged with respect. Alexander pats the horse's mane, whispering as if to seal a pact. The boy has proven himself, not with a sword, but with perception and nerve. And you know, deep down, that this was no ordinary ride. It was the first step toward conquering not just animals, not just men, but empires. The sun dips lower, gilding the scene, and you see Alexander standing tall beside the horse that no one else could master. One boy, one beast, and a shadow no longer feared. The air in Macedon feels heavier now, weighted with whispers. You're standing in the palace corridors when the news rushes in like a cold wind. King Philip II has been struck down. The mighty conqueror, the man who had welded the Greek world together under his spear, is gone in an instant. You hear the rumors swirling: an assassin at a wedding, a knife glinting in the sun, betrayal wrapped in ceremony. Some say it was personal revenge. Others murmur of conspiracy, of plots woven within the royal family itself. You realize quickly that this kingdom, for all its armor and spears, is built on a floor of shifting sand. You see Alexander now, 20 years old, his face pale with shock but hardening by the minute. The halls echo with footsteps, courtiers rushing, generals scheming, everyone calculating where to cast their loyalty. Some eyes dart toward Alexander with suspicion. Is he too young? Too untested? You can almost hear the knives being sharpened behind the curtains. Standing at his side, invisible as ever, you feel the tension press into your chest like the weight of a shield. The funeral is a storm of ritual and silence. Incense thick in the air, wails of mourning mingling with stifled whispers. You notice how Alexander holds himself, shoulders square, chin raised, not weeping but watching. He knows eyes are on him. He knows this isn't just grief, it's politics. If he falters even for a moment, the crown could slip from his grasp and shatter. And then, as though stepping onto a stage, he takes control. You hear his voice rise above the murmurs, calm but firm, declaring himself king. No hesitation, no soft words, just a blade of certainty. His allies rally quickly, but not all. The court is a nest of serpents, and some prefer to wait, to see whether this young heir will truly seize what is his. The army, though, that's where the true power lies. Alexander strides into the camp, where the veterans of Philip's campaigns are gathered, scarred men who've seen more blood than sleep. You stand in the dust with them, watching. He speaks to them not as a child, but as a commander, promising to carry on his father's victories, to lead them not just to war, but to glory greater than they've ever imagined. His voice doesn't tremble, and when he mounts Bucephalus, reins tight in his hand, you feel the shift. The men cheer, not all, but enough. The army accepts him. The crown, for now, is safe. Still, shadows linger. His rivals move quickly. You hear the clatter of chains as would-be pretenders are dragged away, the hiss of steel as threats are cut down before they can bloom. It's brutal, but necessary. Alexander learns fast. To wear the crown, you must not only hold it, you must defend it from every direction, every moment. Historians still debate the role of Alexander's mother, Olympias, in Philip's death. Was she complicit in the assassination? Did she help clear the path for her son's rise? Or was she merely another player swept along by the ruthless currents of Macedonian politics? You can't know, but you catch the way her eyes glitter in the torchlight, fierce and proud, as if she sees in Alexander the fulfillment of her own ambitions. At night, you walk with him through the quiet halls. The echoes are different now, not of a prince, but of a king. He touches the cold stone pillars, perhaps feeling the weight of history pressing into his palms. You imagine him whispering to Achilles again, asking if the hero's path was this lonely at the beginning. And you, pacing silently beside him, understand. The boy is gone. The man who would be conqueror is awake, crowned not only with gold, but with expectation sharpened like a blade. The stars outside seem sharper, brighter, as if the heavens themselves are waiting. Macedon has a new king, and you can feel deep in your bones that the world itself is about to change. You feel the tremor before you hear it, the restless murmur of cities testing the resolve of a young king. Greece is simmering, and you can almost taste the smoke of rebellion drifting through the air. News reaches you like ripples across a pond. Thebes, proud and stubborn, has risen against Macedon. The whispers are sharp, almost smug. The boy won't dare come south, they say. He's too green, too fragile. Macedon's grip will loosen the moment we push. You glance at Alexander, and you can tell from the way his jaw sets that this is not going to end in negotiation. You march with him and his army, dust swirling around your ankles, the steady beat of sandals and hooves pounding into the earth. It feels relentless, like a drum roll that never ends. You're not the one sweating under bronze armor, but you can feel the weight anyway. The sun blazing, the air shimmering, every breath dry and shallow. Alexander rides Bucephalus at the front, eyes fixed forward, not wasting a word. His silence is louder than speeches. When you reach the walls of Thebes, the city stands proud, banners fluttering in defiance. Thebes has history, power, pride. They believe they can outlast him. You can hear the voices of the defenders jeering from the walls, confident in their stones and gates. For a heartbeat, you think, maybe they're right. Maybe this time, Alexander has reached too far, too fast. But then, the siege begins. You're there, feeling the rumble as battering rams smash against gates, the hiss of arrows cutting through the air. The clash is deafening. Shouts, steel, the crack of wood splintering. You see Alexander not hiding in safety, but in the thick of it, urging his men forward with reckless certainty. He moves like a flame, and you realize the danger doesn't scare him. He thrives on it. Thebes resists fiercely, their fighters pouring out in desperate charges. For a moment, the battle tilts, and you feel the panic rise. A spear misses Alexander by inches. You hear the gasp ripple through the ranks. If it had struck true, history would have ended differently right here. But the boy who tamed a wild horse now tames chaos itself, rallying his soldiers back into line. With a final push, the walls crumble. Macedon surges through. And then, the choice. You watch Alexander stand amidst the ruins, breathing hard, dust coating his skin. Thebes has fallen. What happens next will echo through Greece. He could spare them, show mercy, prove himself generous. But mercy isn't the lesson he once remembered. Instead, you feel the earth shake beneath your feet as his order is carried out. The city is razed. Houses burn, temples crack, the proud walls reduced to rubble. Thousands are killed or enslaved, their voices silenced in a single day. The air reeks of smoke and ash, and you can hardly breathe. The horror of it sears itself into you. But so does the message, loud, unmistakable. Every city in Greece now knows, resist, and you will be destroyed. Submit, and you might survive. It's brutal, but it works. The rebellion dissolves before it can spread further. Historians still debate whether Alexander's destruction of Thebes was an act of necessity or cruelty. Was it cold calculation meant to cement his power? Or was it youthful fury, unleashed in a moment of rage? You'll never know for certain. But standing there, hearing the crackle of flames, you understand how fear can be more powerful than loyalty. That night, the camp is eerily quiet. The men feast, but their laughter is uneasy, like they too have witnessed something bigger than themselves. Alexander walks alone through the embers, face lit by flickering orange, his shadow stretched long and thin. He doesn't look back at the ruins. He doesn't need to. He knows every city from Athens to Corinth has heard the message already. And you, trailing behind, can't shake the chill. The prince who once charmed a wild horse has now destroyed a city. The world has started to see what you've begun to know. Alexander is not just a king. He is becoming a force. You wake to the smell of salt and the hush of waves slapping against wooden hulls. The morning light is sharp, glittering across the sea like scattered coins, and you feel the air shift from dry dust to damp mist. You're no longer marching through Greek soil. You're boarding ships, the creak of ropes, the call of sailors, the gulls overhead. It's the sound of a world about to change. Alexander stands at the prow, his cloak whipping in the sea breeze, eyes fixed on the eastern horizon. Asia, Persia. Everything about this moment feels heavy, like the world is holding its breath. You hear murmurs among the soldiers. Some are excited, some terrified. The Persians are rich, powerful, their empire vast enough to make Greece look like a postage stamp. We're ants marching into a lion's den, one soldier mutters. You can't help but agree. But then someone else whispers, "Yeah, but we've got Alexander." And the whisper feels like a shield. The fleet cuts through the water, sails snapping above. Hours pass with the endless rhythm of oars slapping the sea. You lean back, the rocking of the boat almost lulling you into a trance. And then, finally, the coastline rises ahead. Asia Minor. You've crossed the Hellespont, the thin ribbon of water separating Europe from Asia. Just a strait to you, but to Alexander, it's a line between worlds. When the ships beach and the soldiers disembark, you expect Alexander to charge ahead, eager to start a war. Instead, he halts. You watch him step onto the sand, kneel, and scoop up a handful of earth. He lets the grains trickle through his fingers, slow and deliberate, before pressing both palms to the ground as though he's greeting an old friend. It's not just ritual, it's a claim. Asia is ours now, his silence seems to say. Then comes something stranger. He makes a detour to Troy. Yes, Troy, the city of myth and legend, where Achilles fought, where Hector fell, where gods and mortals mingled in epic tales. You wander with him among ruins, crumbling stones worn down by centuries, and you can almost hear echoes of Homer's verses in the wind. Alexander bows at the supposed tomb of Achilles, leaving a garland there. He lingers, hand resting on the stone. You can feel the weight of his boyhood dreams pressing in, the nights spent devouring epic poetry, longing not just to rule, but to matter, to be remembered. He whispers to Hephaestion, his closest companion, Achilles had Patroclus. I have you. It's a rare soft moment, tender and private, that brushes against myth. The soldiers watch all this with mixed reactions. Some roll their eyes. We didn't cross the sea for bedtime stories. Others are awed, convinced they're stepping into history's pages. You, standing in the ruins with the sun beating down, can't help but shiver. It feels like Alexander isn't just invading Persia. He's entering a myth, determined to carve his name beside Achilles. Of course, Persia doesn't care about Greek poetry. They have armies, cities, wealth, and satraps, governors ready to defend their lands. The first test comes quickly. Persian scouts shadow your movements, their riders darting in and out like phantoms. The tension thickens each night around the campfires. Men whisper of the Persian cavalry, famed for their speed and archery. Some clutch charms or talismans, praying for protection. Others sharpen blades, trying to look braver than they feel. And then it happens. The clash at the Granicus River. Dawn mist curls along the banks, the river swollen and cold, its currents fast and unforgiving. On the far side, Persian forces wait, cavalry glittering in the rising sun, armor flashing, horses restless. Crossing that water feels impossible. It's like charging into a wall. The officers murmur, some advising caution. But Alexander? He doesn't hesitate. He mounts Bucephalus, spear in hand, cloak flaring. You can practically hear the collective groan of every cautious voice. Of course he's doing this. The river foams around you as the Macedonian line surges forward. Horses snort, water splashing up to your chest. Arrows rain down from the opposite bank, the hiss of death slicing the air. Men fall, dragged under by current and armor. The chaos is staggering, but somehow Alexander presses through, leading the charge. He fights in the thickest fray, his plume bright against the crush. A Persian nobleman nearly takes him down, a spear grazing his helmet, so close it makes your heart stop. Another slashes at him, but Alexander drives his own spear through the man's face, shattering the tension in one brutal moment. It's madness, and yet it works. Macedonian discipline holds, one push, then another, until the Persians break. You stumble onto the far bank, soaked and trembling, but alive. Around you, the Persians scatter, leaving the field littered with bodies, the river stained dark. Against all odds, you've done it. You've crossed into Asia, and the first great test hasn't crushed you. That night, the campfire glow flickers against tired faces. The men whisper in awe. He shouldn't have survived. None of us should have. but he did. You see Alexander walking among the wounded, speaking softly, promising rewards, promising glory. He orders the burial of the dead with honor, even Persian nobles, saying the gods demand respect. It's a detail that startles you, ruthless in war, but reverent in death. Historians still debate whether the Battle of the Granicus was truly as decisive as Alexander claimed. Some say it was reckless luck. Others insist it was the spark that ignited everything that followed. But sitting by the fire, the sound of the river still echoing in your ears, you know one thing. The legend has begun to solidify. The boy who once tamed a horse has now tamed the river itself, and as the stars scatter across the sky, you feel the strange certainty that you are no longer in a story about Greece and Persia. You're in Alexander's story now, and it's only getting bigger. The roads east grow long and dusty, but they pulse with a strange energy, as though each step takes you deeper into a story you've half heard before. The scent of crushed grass lingers after the army passes, and the clank of armor becomes a constant heartbeat. You think the pace might finally slow. After all, you've crossed into Asia, you've won at the Granicus. Surely Alexander will pause. But no. He marches with the same hunger in his stride, as if the earth itself is a banquet, and he's determined to devour every course. You come to Gordium, a city of modest size but heavy myth. At its center sits an ancient wagon, old wood cracked and dry, bound by a knot so dense and twisted, it looks less like rope and more like a mass of petrified snakes. The Gordian knot. People whisper about it the way children whisper about monsters in the dark. The story goes that whoever can untie this knot is destined to rule all of Asia. Most rulers would smile politely and move on, but Alexander? You can already see the glint in his eye before he even touches it. The crowd gathers. Locals murmur. Macedonian officers shift uneasily. You feel the tension spike. The knot has outlasted centuries of fingers fumbling, kings failing, priests shrugging. But Alexander doesn't hesitate. He kneels, examining the impossible tangle. His fingers tug, test, pull at loops. You lean in, half hoping, half dreading, as the strands resist. The knot is designed not to yield. That's the whole point. For a moment, even Alexander frowns, and then, with a smirk so sharp it feels like a blade, he draws his sword. Before anyone can react, he brings it down in one clean stroke, slicing the knot in two. Silence slams into the square, the ropes fall apart, limp and meaningless. Dust motes float in the stunned stillness. You blink, half shocked, half amused. Did he just cheat? Technically, yes. Did it work? Absolutely. The prophecy didn't specify how the knot must be undone, just that it had to be solved. That's one way to solve your problems, you think. Note to self, when IKEA furniture instructions look impossible, grab a sword. The locals gasp, some in awe, some scandalized. Priests nod with reverence, pretending this was exactly how it was meant to be done. Soldiers laugh nervously like they've just witnessed a divine joke. And Alexander, he doesn't bother explaining. He just wipes his blade clean, shrugs, and walks away, as though fate itself has been neatly filed under completed. Historians still debate the knot's true meaning. Was it an elaborate political stunt staged for Alexander's legend? Was the knot even as impossible as described? Or is the whole episode just a story polished by centuries of retelling? You can't answer that, but you can see how it worked. The man who cut the Gordian knot now looks unstoppable. Where others saw obstacles, he saw shortcuts. And the myth doesn't just ripple through Gordium, it spreads. Whispers carry faster than arrows, and by the time the army moves on, the tale is already reshaping Alexander's image. He isn't just a conqueror, he's destiny made flesh, walking with a sword in hand and a prophecy under his arm. The march continues. The land shifts under your feet, from lush valleys to harsher hills, the air thicker with the promise of Persian retaliation. Yet the soldiers are strangely buoyant. Every step feels lighter when you're following a man who can slice through fate like it's old rope. Even the grumbling about food rations and endless walking dulls. You catch a few jokes in the ranks. Maybe he'll cut the Persian king in half the same way. Careful, he might cut your tent ropes if you complain too loudly. Night falls. The campfires flicker, and shadows stretch long across the ground. Alexander sits apart, staring eastward, his face unreadable. You wonder what he sees out there in the dark, the Persian armies gathering, or Achilles beckoning from the pages of Homer. Maybe both. You realize that for him, every battle isn't just against men. It's against time, against memory, against the threat of being forgotten. As you curl into your blanket, the image of that sliced knot drifts through your mind. The sound of it snapping apart echoes like a promise. Nothing will bind him for long. The air grows heavier as you march farther east, a damp heat pressing against your skin. The landscape changes, mountains rising, rivers carving valleys, fields dotted with villages that vanish at the sight of Macedonian banners. You sense it before anyone says it aloud. Persia is no longer ignoring you. The great king himself, Darius III, is stirring. The whispers creep through the ranks like ants through sandbags. The King of Kings is coming. You feel the tension spike when scouts return with news. Darius and his vast army are near Issus. The numbers are staggering. The Persians don't march with a few thousand. They march with what feels like the weight of an entire empire. Soldiers talk in low tones by the fires, staring into flames as if searching for reassurance there. Some joke nervously, "At least we'll die famous." Others sharpen blades with grim silence. You clutch your cloak tighter, trying to push back the gnawing unease. When the armies finally face each other, it feels surreal. The narrow plain of Issus stretches before you, the sea glittering on one side, the mountains looming on the other. It's almost too tight a space for so many men, like a theater stage overloaded with actors. Across the plain, the Persian army unfolds like a living carpet, bright with banners, horses stamping, ranks stretching so far you almost lose sight of them. At their center stands the royal chariot of Darius himself, gleaming gold, flanked by guards glittering with polished shields. The sight steals your breath. It's not just an army, it's a statement. Persia is vast. Persia is wealthy. Persia is eternal. And then you glance at Alexander, who's grinning like he's about to unwrap a gift. You roll your eyes internally. Of course he's enjoying this. The battle begins with the clash of cavalry. You're in the thick of it, the roar of hooves pounding like thunder across the earth, arrows raining down. The Persians fight hard, their numbers pressing, but the terrain betrays them. The narrow ground stifles their advantage. Alexander seizes the opening, driving his companion cavalry like a wedge straight into the Persian center. You watch him lower his spear, his horse charging forward, dust exploding in his wake. The Macedonian phalanx locks tight, pikes bristling like a wall of needles, grinding forward step by bloody step. The noise is deafening. Shouts, screams, the clash of bronze on bronze. The smell of sweat and iron clogs your throat. And then you see it. The line of Macedonian cavalry slicing straight toward Darius's golden chariot. For a moment, time slows. The great king of Persia, ruler of millions, looks across the chaos and sees Alexander charging directly for him. You can almost hear the crack in his composure from here. Panic flashes in his eyes, and then he flees. The chariot wheels spin, horses lurch, and Darius is gone, vanishing into the dust with his guards scrambling after him. The effect ripples instantly. Persian morale shatters like a dropped jar. The soldiers who moments before stood proud now crumble, retreating in chaos. You stand stunned, watching one man's retreat unravel an empire's army. When the dust clears, the field is littered with the wreckage of battle. Persian dead lie in heaps. Macedonians bloodied but victorious. You see captured tents filled with unimaginable riches, silks, gold, food that doesn't taste like salted leather. But more shocking is who else lies within Darius's abandoned camp? His family. His mother, wife, and daughters, now prisoners of Alexander. You expect harshness, humiliation. Instead, Alexander shows a strange gentleness. He treats them with honor, as though they are still royalty, untouched by the shame of their king's flight. It's a detail that spreads like wildfire. Ruthless in war, yet unexpectedly merciful in victory. Historians still debate whether Darius's flight was cowardice or strategy. Some argue he lived to fight another day. Others claim the moment doomed Persia forever. You only know what you saw. A king turning away while another charged forward. That night, the soldiers feast as though they have swallowed victory itself. Laughter booms, wine flows, and yet you can't shake the image of Darius's golden chariot abandoned in the dust. Alexander sits apart again, eyes glimmering in the firelight, his smile quiet, dangerous. He doesn't speak much, but his presence hums like a storm held in check. You realize then, this isn't just about battles anymore. It's about kingship itself. One man claims to rule millions. The other charges through rivers and across plains to prove he deserves it. And tonight, Alexander's shadow feels longer, stretching east, chasing a king who seems to shrink with every mile. The road south feels different, less frantic, more inevitable. The dust still clings to your sandals, but the air shifts, carrying hints of the desert. You're leaving behind the chaos of Issus, the sound of Persian armor clattering away into the distance and marching into lands that whisper with ancient gods. Egypt waits, and you can already sense it. It's not going to resist the way others have. You walk through lands scorched golden by the sun, the horizon rippling with heat. Villages appear, their mud brick walls soft against the harsh desert. And yet, when Macedonian banners crest the hills, there is no resistance. The Persians had held Egypt like a prized jewel, but their authority was brittle here, stretched thin. When Alexander arrives, he's not met with arrows or spears. He's met with open arms. To the Egyptians, the Persians were occupiers. To Alexander, who sweeps in after Issus with victory at his back, they see not a conqueror, but a liberator. You can feel it in the crowds. Priests in white robes step forward, offering blessings, their voices deep and rhythmic, like waves against stone. The people cheer, their chants echoing against temple walls. "Pharaoh!" they call him. Though he was born far from the Nile, you blink at the sight. Alexander, the Macedonian boy king, standing in the shadow of ancient gods older than Homer's words. And yet, he wears the title easily, as though Egypt had simply been waiting for him all along. There's a moment you don't forget. In Memphis, he's crowned Pharaoh, the divine ruler of Egypt. You watch him receive the double crown, the symbol of Upper and Lower Egypt united. Gold gleams under the desert sun, the air thick with incense and chants. For a flicker, it's almost funny. This man who cut through a knot with his sword, now standing as God King among pyramids. You mutter under your breath, well, that escalated quickly. But Egypt doesn't just welcome him with ceremony, he responds with vision. Standing at the edge of the sea, wind in his hair, Alexander traces a line in the sand with his spear. "Here," he says, almost offhandedly, "here we will build a city." You squint at the empty shoreline, the waves lapping lazily. It seems unimpressive, but he sees something else. He sees ships docking, markets bustling, scholars debating under colonnades. He names it Alexandria. You wonder if he realizes he's sketching immortality into the dust. The soldiers, of course, are less poetic. They grumble about the heat, about the endless sand, about the food that seems to consist of bread and more bread. But even they can't deny the allure of Egypt. The Nile glimmers like a vein of life itself, its waters cool and sweet after days of thirst. Palms sway lazily in the breeze, crocodiles lurk in muddy shallows, and the temples rise like puzzles from another age. You wander through halls lined with hieroglyphs, the carvings sharp despite centuries, eyes of stone gods watching you in eternal silence. And then comes the strangest part of all, the journey into the desert, to the oracle of Siwa. You trudge with Alexander across miles of shifting sand, the sun a merciless overseer, the dunes endless. Your skin burns, your lips crack, your feet sink with every step. You mutter complaints that vanish in the wind, only to glance at Alexander striding as though the desert itself is his stage. At last, you reach the oasis, palm trees swaying, water shimmering like glass. The oracle waits, mysterious, cloaked in riddles. What passes between Alexander and the oracle is whispered, never confirmed. Some say the priests addressed him as the son of Zeus Ammon, fusing Greek and Egyptian divinity. Others claim he asked a question, something private, something no one else heard, and received an answer that changed him forever. You aren't told the words. You only see him emerge, eyes brighter, quieter, as though he now carries a secret you'll never share. Historians still debate what happened in Siwa. Did the oracle truly declare him divine? Or was it theater, a stage performance to solidify his rule? The records don't agree. But as you stand in the oasis night, stars scattered across the desert sky, you sense it doesn't matter. Alexander believes, and belief, you realize, is a weapon as sharp as any spear. When you return to the Nile, the soldiers are restless again, itching for action, for war, for plunder. Egypt is quiet, too quiet for them. Alexander lingers, overseeing temples, issuing decrees, sketching plans for his shining city on the coast. You catch him gazing out across the river, its waters glimmering silver in the moonlight. He doesn't look satisfied. He looks hungry still. Always hungry. You fall asleep to the soft rush of the Nile, the air cooler here, the buzz of insects weaving into the lull. Egypt has given him crowns, cities, and even divinity. But you know it's only a pause. Persia waits beyond, and Alexander has unfinished business with a king who ran from Issus. The march north pulls you from the calm of the Nile back into the sharp edge of war. Egypt had been like a dream, temples, incense, crowns of gold. But dreams don't last. Dust rises again under your feet. The clang of iron grows louder, and whispers of Darius spread through the camp like a chill. He isn't finished. The great king has gathered what remains of his power, pulling soldiers from every corner of his empire. They say the army waiting at Gaugamela isn't just large, it's impossible. Nights before the battle, you feel the nervous buzz in the camp. Soldiers polish armor until it gleams, mutter prayers to gods both Greek and foreign, and share jokes that fall flat in the heavy air. Fires crackle, but the laughter doesn't stick. Even veterans keep glancing east, as if expecting the horizon itself to rise against them. One man swears he heard there are war elephants, creatures tall as houses, armored and terrible. You try to laugh it off, but the image sticks. Dawn comes, and with it, the battlefield. You crest a rise and see it laid out before you, a vast plain stretching flat and wide, cleared by Persian labor so their chariots can roll unhindered. And there, like a living sea, Darius's army. Tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, spread across the horizon in waves of steel and color. War elephants lumber at the edges, their trunks swaying. Scythe chariots glint in the sun, blades fixed to their wheels. At the center, high on a platform chariot, stands Darius, his banners snapping in the wind. It is overwhelming, absurd, like staring into the face of infinity. You glance at the Macedonian line, so small in comparison, so fragile. The men know it too. You can see it in their eyes, a flicker of doubt. But then Alexander rides the line, Bucephalus steady beneath him. He calls out, voice clear, eyes blazing. You can't hear every word, but you hear enough. Victory is not in numbers, but in strength, in discipline, in courage. He points to Darius. There is the man who abandoned his family. Today we end this, and something strange happens. The fear softens. Shoulders square, spears lift. You feel it too, a warmth against the cold dread. The Persians move first. Chariots thunder across the plain, wheels spinning, blades flashing. The ground shakes beneath you, horses scream. For a moment, it feels unstoppable. But the Macedonian lines part just in time, opening gaps. The chariots hurtle through harmlessly, skewered by spears, their momentum shattered. Dust and blood churn together. Then the real clash begins. Persian infantry surges forward, a wall of men pressing against your shield. The sound is unbearable, metal clanging, men shouting, the dull thud of bodies colliding. You lock in the phalanx, shoulder to shoulder, spear thrusting, shield bracing. Around you, the world dissolves into fragments. A scream here, a spray of sand there, a flash of steel catching the sun, and then you see him. Alexander, at the head of the companion cavalry, making his move. He doesn't crash randomly into the fight. He angles, precise, cutting diagonally toward the Persian center. The wedge formation glitters, pushing hard, straight for Darius himself. You realize it in a rush. This isn't just battle, it's assassination in motion. For one impossible heartbeat, the two kings are nearly face to face. Alexander's eyes blaze, spear leveled, charging like a storm given flesh. Darius sees it. You swear you can almost hear his heartbeat falter. And then, it happens again. The great king flees. His guards scramble, his chariot turns, and the vast Persian army cracks like glass under a hammer. The chain reaction is instant. Soldiers lose faith, formations dissolve, the invincible host becomes a flood of retreating men. When the dust settles, the plain of Gaugamela is a graveyard. Thousands of Persians lie still, their banners trampled into mud. Macedonians limp through the wreckage, faces streaked with sweat and blood. The victory is absolute. Persia, once thought eternal, lies broken. Alexander stands in the middle of it, cloak tattered, eyes burning. He doesn't gloat. He doesn't need to. The silence around him screams louder than triumph. That night, the camp is wild with celebration. Men laugh until they weep, drink until they collapse, sing songs too slurred to follow. But you can't shake the image of Darius's flight. Twice now, the King of Kings has turned his back on his army. Historians still debate whether he was a coward, a pragmatist preserving his life, or simply overwhelmed by a force he couldn't comprehend. You only know what you saw. One king fled, the other pursued. And when Alexander walks among the tents, firelight licking across his face, you feel the strange certainty that something irreversible has happened. He isn't just winning battles anymore. He has claimed an empire. You lie awake under the stars, the plain of Gaugamela stretching out silent and endless. The air is still thick with the scent of iron and dust. You know you'll remember this night forever. The moment the world shifted on its axis, tilting toward a boy from Macedon who refused to stop charging. The march into Babylon feels different from every other campaign before it. Not just another city to conquer, not another fortress to storm. This is Babylon, the jewel of Mesopotamia, the ancient heart of empires, older than Greece itself. You've heard the stories since childhood. Hanging gardens that float in the air, walls so vast they could race chariots across the top, temples that pierce the heavens. Babylon is myth turned stone, and now it lies before you. The gates open not with battle, but with ceremony. Trumpets sound, priests line the streets, and the citizens welcome Alexander as if he were a liberator, not an invader. Gold is scattered like sunlight on the road, and flowers drift down from balconies. It's surreal, unsettling. After years of blood and iron, the sudden embrace of peace feels like walking into a dream you don't quite trust. Men whisper that the Babylonians have always bent to whoever holds power. Once it was the Assyrians, then the Persians, and now the Macedonians. Babylon survives by bowing, by flowing like the river that feeds it. You walk through avenues wide enough to drown in, past statues of gods whose names you barely know. Marduk, Ishtar, Nabu. The temples rise like mountains, carved with stars and winged beasts. For a moment you feel small, like an ant crawling through a story too vast for comprehension. And there, in the heart of the city, Alexander dismounts. He kneels, not in worship of conquest, but in respect. He orders the temples restored, the priests honored. He even makes sacrifices to Marduk, taking the role of Babylon's new king, as if it had always been meant for him. The men cheer, but whispers follow. Some say he is no longer simply Alexander of Macedon, no longer merely king of the Greeks. Here, in Babylon, he becomes something else, a figure straddling worlds, Greek and Persian, mortal and divine. The crown of Asia is his now. But Babylon is not the end. The road winds farther east, into the Persian heartland. And so, weeks later, you find yourself gazing upon Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the empire, the pride of Darius, the stone proclamation of Persian glory. Columns rise like a forest of marble spears, each etched with images of tribute bearers, Medes, Egyptians, Indians, Scythians, all bringing gifts to the great king. Persepolis is not just a city, it is the empire carved in stone, a visual reminder that the world once bowed to Persia. And now Alexander stands before it. He enters in triumph, soldiers trailing behind, banners fluttering. There is awe in his face. Yes, but something else too, something harder. He lingers in the great halls, his hand brushing the carvings as if feeling the pulse of an empire's soul. You sense it then. This place is dangerous for him, not because of enemies, but because of temptation. Persepolis is so rich, so magnificent, it could swallow even Alexander's will. For days the army celebrates among the palaces. Wine flows in rivers, gold is heaped in piles. Women dance under torchlight. The spoils are beyond imagination. They say the treasuries of Persepolis hold more wealth than all of Greece combined. Soldiers gorge themselves, laughing, staggering, their pockets heavy with jewels. You should feel joy, but there's something uneasy in the air. Victory has become indulgence. Then comes the night. A night whispered about for centuries, argued over by historians, recounted in every tone from horror to admiration. The torches burn low, the wine runs deep, and Alexander, flushed with triumph, intoxicated with power, listens as courtiers suggest a gesture. Burn it, they say. Burn Persepolis. Reduce it to ash, a final punishment for Xerxes and his invasion of Greece over a century ago. A symbol, they claim, that Persia's time is finished forever. At first, you think he will refuse. But then, a courtesan named Thais lifts her voice, urging him on with a smile. She reminds him of Athens, of temples desecrated, of Greece humiliated. The soldiers roar approval, pounding their cups on the tables. Alexander rises, his face lit by firelight, eyes bright with something you cannot name. He takes a torch. You follow him into the night, up the grand stairways of Persepolis, into the heart of its palaces. Columns stretch into darkness above, painted with gold and lapis. The silence is heavy, sacred, and then the torch arcs through the air. Flames leap onto draperies, banners, wood. One by one, more torches fly, more fires bloom. Within moments, Persepolis is ablaze. The heat roars against your skin, the smoke curls into your lungs, and the sound is monstrous. Stone cracking, beams collapsing, treasures melting. The soldiers dance in the firelight, drunk on destruction. You stand frozen, watching centuries of empire turn to ash in a single night. The palace of Darius, the pride of Persia, burns like kindling. Some say Alexander regretted it the next morning, that he awoke with a sober heart and realized he had destroyed not an enemy's house, but a monument of humanity. Others claim he never doubted, that Persepolis had to die for his vision to live. Historians still debate his motives: revenge, drunken impulse, political theater, or simply the intoxicating thrill of power, unbound. You only know what you saw. A boy who once tamed a wild horse set fire to an empire. And as the flames consumed the night, you realize that Alexander was no longer just conquering. He was reshaping the world in his own image, and nothing, not temples, not kings, not even history itself, was safe from his hand. That night, long after the cheers fade and the fires smolder into ruin, you lie awake on the scorched earth. The stars above seem distant, colder than ever. You wonder, not for the first time, whether you are walking beside a man or a force of nature, and whether there is truly a difference anymore. The ashes of Persepolis still cling to your clothes as the march resumes. The air smells faintly of smoke, as though even the winds of Asia cannot carry away what happened there. Yet Alexander does not look back. His gaze fixes east, always east, as if the sun itself were pulling him forward. The Persian Empire is fractured but not finished, and Darius, though stripped of power, still breathes. For Alexander, that is intolerable. You follow him through harsh lands where the horizon feels endless. The mountains of Media loom, jagged and cold, their passes treacherous with snow. Soldiers grumble, cloaks wrap tight, but Alexander pushes them onward with the relentlessness of a storm. He promises warmth and riches, but his eyes tell another story. He wants Darius. Not just Persia, not just the crown, Darius himself. The pursuit becomes personal, almost obsessive. Scouts rush in with whispers. Darius fled here. His camp is there. His forces march ahead. Each time you think you're close, he slips away like smoke between fingers. The men mutter that the great king is cursed to live just beyond Alexander's grasp. Still, the chase continues. One night in a barren plain, you hear that Darius has been betrayed. His own satraps, once loyal governors, have turned against him. Bessus, his cousin, leads the coup. Darius is no longer king but prisoner, bound and dragged like a common criminal. You imagine the humiliation. The king of kings tied to a cart, abandoned by those who once groveled before him. Even empires crumble not by enemies, but by treachery within. Days later, your column stumbles upon the scene. A cart stands crooked in the dust, its wheels broken. Around it, silence hangs heavy. You approach, heart pounding, and there he is, Darius, lying in the dirt, pierced by spears. His killers fled, leaving only the dying king and the sky above him. His breath is shallow, his eyes clouded. But when Alexander kneels beside him, something remarkable happens. Alexander takes his hand. He whispers words you cannot hear, but you see the tension in his face, the gentleness in his touch. Later, men will say he promised Darius a burial fit for a king, that he cursed Bessus as a traitor and vowed vengeance. Some even claim Darius asked Alexander to avenge him, handing over his empire in his final moments. Whether true or not, the story spreads like wildfire. And so, Darius, last king of Persia, dies not in battle, but in betrayal, abandoned in the wilderness. Alexander orders his body wrapped in royal silk, guarded with honor, and sent back to Persepolis for burial. You feel the weight of it. Persia is finished. The empire that once stretched from the Aegean to the Indus is no more. The soldiers cheer, thinking the war is finally done. But you see Alexander's eyes. There is no relief there, no satisfaction, only hunger. He speaks of vengeance on Bessus, of pressing farther into the unknown lands beyond. He does not claim to be merely king of Macedon or conqueror of Persia. Now he calls himself Lord of Asia. The words sound heavy in the air, like thunder rolling across mountains. At camp that night, as fires flickered low, the men trade stories. They joke about finally going home, about spending their loot on farms or wine or women. But deep down, they know the truth. Alexander will not stop. Persia was never the end. It was only a stepping stone. Eastward lies new lands, new peoples, new legends to carve into the earth. A strange calm settles over you. You remember the boy who cut the Gordian knot, the youth who tamed Bucephalus, the man who burned Persepolis. And now you see the pattern clearly. Every victory births a new ambition. Each conquest is not closure, but fuel. The horizon is infinite, and Alexander is chasing it like a man possessed. Historians still debate what drove him. Was it revenge for Greece, a genuine mission to unite cultures, or simply the intoxication of endless conquest? You cannot say. You only know that the chase of Darius has ended, but the chase of the world itself has begun. As dawn rises, Alexander mounts Bucephalus once more. His cloak ripples in the wind, his hand points east, and the command is given. You feel the march resume under your feet, each step carrying you farther into lands unknown. Persia lies behind you, conquered and broken, but ahead, India, mystery, and perhaps something even greater. The road is long, and you wonder how far a man can go before the world itself runs out. The dust of Darius's burial has barely settled before Alexander turns his eyes toward Bessus. The satrap who betrayed his own king cannot be allowed to live, not in Alexander's world. You feel the determination burning off him like desert heat. This is no longer war for empire. This is a personal vendetta. And so, once again, you march east. The landscapes shift as the days bleed together. Gone are the monumental palaces of Persia. Now the earth stretches wide and empty, a land of endless horizons. You pass through deserts where the sun presses down so hard your armor feels like an oven. You cross rivers swollen with ice melt, their waters dark and violent, threatening to sweep men away. Then the steppes open before you, vast plains of grass and wind, where the horizon trembles in the distance. Horses thunder across them, swift and free, belonging to no one but the sky. The men murmur uneasily. These lands are far from Greece, farther still from Babylon. The names of villages sound strange, the gods unfamiliar. You feel as though you've stepped off the edge of the world, into some place where maps fade and myths begin. Yet Alexander rides ahead, tireless, his mind fixed on the traitor he pursues. Bessus retreats deeper into Bactria, the satrapy of shifting loyalties and mountain fortresses. Rumors swirl. He declares himself king of kings now, draping himself in the ruined dignity of Persia. But his rule is fragile, propped up by fear more than devotion. You sense it's only a matter of time before his allies turn on him, as he once turned on Darius. Treachery begets treachery, and Bessus's time runs short. One evening, the scouts return with news. Bessus has been captured. Not by Alexander, but by his own officers, who deliver him in chains. When Alexander sees him, beaten and trembling, he does not look triumphant. Instead, his face is hard, cold as the stone palaces of Susa. He orders Bessus whipped, mutilated, paraded before the army, a reminder of what happens to traitors. Then, in a cruel echo of Persian justice, Bessus is executed as he once betrayed his king. For Alexander, this is not just vengeance, it is theater, a performance meant to show the soldiers, the Persians, the whole world, that betrayal will never be rewarded under his reign. You shiver as you watch, realizing again that conquest for him is not simply about land, but about rewriting the rules of power itself. And yet, amid the harshness of war and justice, something unexpected happens. In Bactria, among the rugged mountains and restless tribes, Alexander encounters a woman, Roxana. Her name means little star, and when she enters the tent, carrying herself with a calm defiance, you understand why the poets would later immortalize her. She is the daughter of a local noble, proud, striking, with dark eyes that seem to weigh every word before it leaves your lips. Alexander sees her, and for once the conqueror looks disarmed. The man who faced the armies of Persia without blinking now lingers on a single gaze. Soon, word spreads. He will marry her. The army is stunned. A Macedonian king, wedding not a Greek princess but a Bactrian noblewoman? It feels impossible, scandalous even. Some whisper that it is a political move to secure the loyalty of these fierce lands. Others murmur that Alexander is, for once, acting not from strategy, but from love. The wedding is both strange and beautiful. There are no grand halls of marble, no golden thrones, only a rugged camp, lit with torches, filled with music that sounds foreign to your ears. Soldiers watch with curiosity as Alexander shares bread with Roxana, a symbol of unity. In that moment, you see something softer in him, a glimpse of the man behind the ambition, a conqueror who can pause, however briefly, to claim companionship instead of land. Of course, the cynics have their say. A king doesn't fall in love, one soldier mutters, swirling his wine. A king calculates. But you can't help but notice how Alexander's expression changes when Roxana is near. Less like a general surveying maps, more like a boy seeing the stars for the first time. Historians still debate whether it was true love or political expediency. But standing there, you wonder if the truth is not both. Life in Bactria is harsh, though. Rebellions flare like brush fires, and Alexander must quash them one by one. It's a land too wild to be easily tamed, its people too proud to bow quietly. The army grows restless, weary of endless marches through alien landscapes. They long for the comforts of home, for the familiar sun of Macedon. But Alexander pushes on, promising that beyond Bactria lies glory untold. One night, lying under foreign stars, you realize how far you've come. Greece feels like a half-remembered dream. Babylon, Persepolis, even Darius's death, all seem distant now, swallowed by the vastness of Asia. You are adrift on an ocean of land, carried forward by the will of one man who refuses to stop. And somewhere deep down, you begin to suspect that there will never be enough. The march east grinds on, and the names of rivers blur together like half-remembered dreams. But when you reach the Oxus, you feel it. A boundary, a threshold. The water spreads wide and swift, colder than steel, its surface glimmering beneath a merciless sun. To cross it is to leave behind even the shattered echoes of Persia and step into a world unknown. Alexander doesn't hesitate. He orders rafts built from reeds and skins, and soon the army is ferrying across, men clutching their shields and praying they won't be swept away. You grip the edge, heart pounding as the current snarls at your feet, and you wonder if this river is trying to remind you that some borders were never meant to be crossed. Beyond the Oxus lies Sogdiana, a land fierce and unyielding, with fortresses perched atop cliffs and riders who vanish like smoke across the plains. But Alexander isn't here just to pacify these tribes. He has a larger goal. Word spreads that the Scythians dwell beyond the Jaxartes, nomads who live on horseback, whose arrows can darken the sky. They are not kings, not empires, but a people woven into the very steppe. To fight them is to fight the wind. Still, Alexander cannot resist. Perhaps it is pride, perhaps curiosity, or perhaps he simply cannot abide an enemy he has not yet tested. He orders the army northward to the Jaxartes, the river Greeks will later call the Tanais. When you reach its banks, the sight takes your breath. An endless plain stretching to the horizon, rippling with grass and heat haze. Somewhere out there, the Scythians are watching. The crossing is brutal. The current here is even fiercer than the Oxus, and men cling to each other as the water drags at their legs. Horses thrash, eyes wide with fear. But Alexander presses forward, and soon the Macedonians stand on the far side, dripping and shivering, staring into the void of the steppe. The Scythians appear at last, riders darting like shadows. They don't form ranks, don't march with spears raised. Instead, they swirl and circle, loosing arrows that whistle through the air and vanish before you can even raise a shield. Their horses move like extensions of their bodies, hooves barely seeming to touch the ground. You realize quickly this is no ordinary foe. This is a storm given flesh. The battle stretches on for hours, then days. Macedonian phalanxes stand like walls of iron, but the Scythians refuse to meet them head-on. They dash in, loose arrows, and vanish again. Men fall clutching shafts in their throats, shields bristling like porcupines. The frustration builds until even seasoned veterans curse under their breath. How do you fight an enemy that refuses to stand still? Alexander adapts. He orders cavalry feints, ambushes hidden in dust clouds, traps laid with ruthless precision. Slowly, agonizingly, the tide turns. One by one, Scythian riders fall into the snares, dragged down by lances and swords. At last, the enemy withdraws, their loss is heavy, their pride stung. The Macedonians cheer, though their voices are hoarse with exhaustion. Historians still debate the meaning of this battle. Some say Alexander proved he could master even the wild nomads of the steppe. Others argue it was a hollow victory, a distraction that drained men and morale for little gain. Standing there, watching the riders vanish into the horizon, you suspect both are true. The Scythians are not conquered. They are simply gone, carried away by the winds of their homeland. And yet, the aftermath leaves scars. The army is weary, more than weary. It is stretched to breaking. Men mutter openly now about going home. They have marched farther than Odysseus, farther than Heracles, farther than any story sung in Greece. The spoils feel hollow. The land offers little but dust and endless struggle. Some begin to wonder if Alexander even remembers what home means. But he cannot stop. He found the edge of Persia and stepped beyond it. He tasted victory over enemies no Greek had ever seen. And now, with each horizon he conquers, he craves the next. Even as the men beg for rest, even as the land grows harsher, Alexander's eyes remain fixed on the east. One evening, as the campfire smoke drifts into a sky littered with unfamiliar constellations, you look at him, this man who has carried you across continents, who burns cities and marries stars, who tames rivers and hunts the wind. And for the first time, you wonder if Alexander's greatest enemy is not Darius, not Bessus, not the Scythians, but the horizon itself. The march east grinds on, and the names of rivers blur together like half-remembered dreams. But when you reach the Oxus, you feel it. A boundary, a threshold. The water spreads wide and swift, colder than steel, its surface glimmering beneath a merciless sun. To cross it is to leave behind even the shattered echoes of Persia and step into a world unknown. Alexander doesn't hesitate. He orders rafts built from reeds and skins, and soon the army is ferrying across, men clutching their shields and praying they won't be swept away. You grip the edge, heart pounding as the current snarls at your feet, and you wonder if this river is trying to remind you that some borders were never meant to be crossed. Beyond the Oxus lies Sogdiana, a land fierce and unyielding, with fortresses perched atop cliffs and riders who vanish like smoke across the plains. But Alexander isn't here just to pacify these tribes. He has a larger goal. Word spreads that the Scythians dwell beyond the Jaxartes, nomads who live on horseback, whose arrows can darken the sky. They are not kings, not empires, but a people woven into the very steppe. To fight them is to fight the wind. Still, Alexander cannot resist. Perhaps it is pride, perhaps curiosity, or perhaps he simply cannot abide an enemy he has not yet tested. He orders the army northward to the Jaxartes, the river Greeks will later call the Tanais. When you reach its banks, the sight takes your breath. An endless plain stretching to the horizon, rippling with grass and heat haze. Somewhere out there, the Scythians are watching. The crossing is brutal. The current here is even fiercer than the Oxus, and men cling to each other as the water drags at their legs. Horses thrash, eyes wide with fear. But Alexander presses forward, and soon the Macedonians stand on the far side, dripping and shivering, staring into the void of the steppe. The Scythians appear at last, riders darting like shadows. They don't form ranks, don't march with spears raised. Instead, they swirl and circle, loosing arrows that whistle through the air and vanish before you can even raise a shield. Their horses move like extensions of their bodies, hooves barely seeming to touch the ground. You realize quickly this is no ordinary foe. This is a storm given flesh. The battle stretches on for hours, then days. Macedonian phalanxes stand like walls of iron, but the Scythians refuse to meet them head-on. They dash in, loose arrows, and vanish again. Men fall clutching shafts in their throats, shields bristling like porcupines. The frustration builds until even seasoned veterans curse under their breath. How do you fight an enemy that refuses to stand still? Alexander adapts. He orders cavalry feints, ambushes hidden in dust clouds, traps laid with ruthless precision. Slowly, agonizingly, the tide turns. One by one, Scythian riders fall into the snares, dragged down by lances and swords. At last, the enemy withdraws, their loss is heavy, their pride stung. The Macedonians cheer, though their voices are hoarse with exhaustion. Historians still debate the meaning of this battle. Some say Alexander proved he could master even the wild nomads of the steppe. Others argue it was a hollow victory, a distraction that drained men and morale for little gain. Standing there, watching the riders vanish into the horizon, you suspect both are true. The Scythians are not conquered. They are simply gone, carried away by the winds of their homeland. And yet, the aftermath leaves scars. The army is weary, more than weary. It is stretched to breaking. Men mutter openly now about going home. They have marched farther than Odysseus, farther than Heracles, farther than any story sung in Greece. The spoils feel hollow. The land offers little but dust and endless struggle. Some begin to wonder if Alexander even remembers what home means. But he cannot stop. He found the edge of Persia and stepped beyond it. He tasted victory over enemies no Greek had ever seen. And now, with each horizon he conquers, he craves the next. Even as the men beg for rest, even as the land grows harsher, Alexander's eyes remain fixed on the east. One evening, as the campfire smoke drifts into a sky littered with unfamiliar constellations, you look at him, this man who has carried you across continents, who burns cities and marries stars, who tames rivers and hunts the wind. And for the first time, you wonder if Alexander's greatest enemy is not Darius, not Bessus, not the Scythians, but the horizon itself. The rivers are behind you now, but the land ahead is no gentler. Sogdiana rises in jagged cliffs and harsh valleys, a place where fortresses cling to mountaintops like the nests of eagles. The people here are not awed by Alexander's victories, nor cowed by his banners. They know their terrain, they know the cold, and they know that invaders rarely last. To conquer Persia was one thing. To conquer Sogdiana is another entirely. The first of these fortresses comes into view after days of climbing through rocky passes. It seems to grow out of the cliff itself, walls blending seamlessly with the mountain. The men mutter that it is impossible to take, that even birds would struggle to reach its gates. Alexander listens, silent, then looks up with that unsettling glint in his eyes. The one you've seen before, the one that means impossibility is just an invitation. He calls for volunteers, men unafraid of heights or death. By torchlight they scale the cliffs, clutching ropes, clinging to stone with bleeding fingers. You watch from below, your heart hammering as their figures vanish into the dark sky. Hours later, as dawn breaks, you see them at the summit, tiny specks waving their arms. Alexander orders a charge, and the defenders, seeing Macedonians already above them, surrender in disbelief. What was said to be unreachable is suddenly his. But the mountain victories come at a cost. The soldiers grow restless, their patience frayed by endless climbs and bitter cold. And then, like a flame in dry grass, rebellion spreads. Spidomenes, a local noble, rallies tribes and warriors against the invaders. He strikes not in grand battles, but with ambushes, raids, vanishing before Macedonian spears can touch him. Villages that once bent the knee rise up again, encouraged by his defiance. Spidomenes becomes a ghost story in the camp, a shadow haunting every road. Men wake at night, clutching their weapons at phantom sounds. Supplies vanish, scouts disappear, entire detachments are slaughtered in the dark. You feel the dread coiling in your gut. Alexander may have beaten empires, but here, against the steppe and the mountain, against an enemy who refuses to stand still, the victory is less certain. Still, Alexander adapts. He sends cavalry racing across plains, orders forts built to secure supply lines, divides his forces to hunt Spidomenes across vast territories. The pursuit is relentless, grueling. Months blur together, seasons shift, and still the struggle continues. It's no longer the swift campaigns of Greece or Persia. This is a war of attrition, and the men know it. Their bodies grow leaner, their tempers shorter. And yet, amid the hardship, the strange duality of Alexander remains. He wages ruthless war by day, yet by night he weaves bonds with the land he conquers. He marries Roxana, the Bactrian star, and hosts feasts with local nobles. He learns their customs, adopts fragments of their dress. Some Macedonians grumble that their king is becoming less Greek with every passing day, while others whisper that perhaps he is becoming something greater, something meant to rule all peoples, not just one. One evening, as the wind howls through camp, Alexander gathers the men and speaks of Heracles, of Achilles, of heroes who face trials far greater than comfort and won immortality. His voice is calm, almost soothing, but his words dig deep. He paints the struggle not as misery, but as destiny. By the time he finishes, the men's exhaustion feels almost like pride. You realize then why they follow him. He can make suffering itself feel like a kind of glory. Still, Spidomenes proves elusive. The war drags on, and discontent festers. Rumors spread of mutiny, of men plotting to abandon the campaign. Alexander responds with a mix of clemency and ferocity, rewarding loyalty lavishly, punishing dissent without hesitation. It is a delicate balance, and you wonder how long it can last. In the end, Spidomenes does not fall to Alexander's sword. Betrayal finds him instead. His own allies, weary of endless struggle, kill him and present his head as an offering. When Alexander sees it, he shows no triumph, only a grim acceptance. Perhaps he understands. True power is not only won on battlefields, but in the fragile webs of loyalty and fear that bind men together. Historians still debate whether Alexander truly conquered Sogdiana or merely outlasted it. The fortresses are taken, the rebellions quelled, but the land never feels fully subdued. For every village that swears loyalty, another simmers in resentment. Yet, for now, the steppe is quiet, the mountains hold their peace, and Alexander looks once more to the horizon. Because beyond these wild lands lies India, a name that has haunted Greek imagination for centuries. A place of gold and elephants, of strange gods and endless rivers. The stories are half myth, half geography, but to Alexander, that only makes them more irresistible. And as you shoulder your pack, tightening the straps. You feel it in your bones. The hardest trials are yet to come. The horizon shifts. Where once there were deserts and mountains, now the land breathes with rivers, forests, and monsoon rains. India, so long whispered in Greek tales as a place at the edge of the known world, now rises before Alexander and his army. The very air feels different, thick with heat, alive with strange birdsong, heavy with scents of jasmine and earth. For the Macedonians, hardened by years of dust and stone, this lush world seems almost unreal. Crossing into India is not a march, but a rebirth. The soldiers wade through rivers that never seem to end, their armor soaked, their spirits tested by swarms of insects and unrelenting storms. Boots rot, rations spoil, men collapse under the weight of the climate. Yet Alexander presses on, eyes burning with the same hunger as when he first crossed the Hellespont. He tells the men that here lies the true prize, not Persia, not Egypt, but India, where glory is infinite and riches unmeasured. The first encounters are swift victories. Small kingdoms fall to his banners, their rulers dazzled or broken by the invader's resolve. Yet whispers spread of a king who will not bend, a monarch of great stature who commands war elephants, the living towers of the battlefield. His name is Porus, and in the hearts of the men, that name grows heavy. At last, the two armies face each other on the banks of the Hydaspes River. The rains pour down, turning the ground to a treacherous mire. On one side, Alexander's phalanx gleams in disciplined formation, cavalry poised like a blade ready to strike. On the other, Porus looms atop a massive elephant, his warriors arrayed in glittering armor, the beasts trumpeting as though the jungle itself had come alive. The night before the battle, you lie awake listening to the storm. The soldiers whisper in the dark, wondering if even Alexander can prevail against beasts that tower over horses, tusks glinting like spears in the lightning. You too feel the doubt, gnawing at the edges of your resolve. But then you remember the cliffs of Sogdiana, the deserts of Persia, the impossible always made real. When dawn breaks, Alexander makes his move. Using cunning more than brute force, he crosses the swollen river under cover of night, outflanking Porus. The battle that follows is chaos made flesh. Elephants charge, scattering men and horses, crushing shields beneath their weight. The air fills with the screams of men and beasts alike, the clash of steel against hide. The phalanx bends but does not break. Cavalry darts like lightning around the lumbering giants. You fight, drenched in mud and blood, barely able to distinguish friend from foe in the storm. More than once you glimpse Alexander himself at the heart of the chaos, spear flashing, eyes fixed only on victory. The man seems untouchable, as though the gods themselves shield him. And then, slowly, impossibly, the tide shifts. The elephants, maddened by wounds, turn back against their own lines. Porus fights on, refusing to yield even as his warriors falter. His courage is so fierce that when at last he is captured, even Alexander does not exult. Instead, he asks Porus how he wishes to be treated. The king, towering and wounded, replies with a single word: like a king. Alexander, struck by the dignity of the answer, grants him not only his life, but his throne, restored and enlarged. The army is stunned. Victory usually meant annihilation, but here, mercy and respect are the spoils. To Alexander, Porus is no mere enemy. He is a mirror, a ruler carved from the same mold, worthy of honor even in defeat. Yet, even as Porus is restored, the army itself frays. The men, weary of endless conquest, begin to murmur. They have marched farther than any Greek dreamed possible, and still Alexander speaks of pushing on, deeper into India, toward lands where the sun itself seems foreign. But in their hearts the soldiers know. Their strength is finite, their bodies fragile, their homes impossibly far away. One night, as rain batters the tents, a delegation approaches Alexander. They beg him to turn back, to be content with what has been won. He listens in silence, his jaw clenched, eyes burning with an anger you have seen before. To him, stopping now is a betrayal of destiny itself. But even kings cannot march without an army. At the banks of the Hephaestus River, the truth is laid bare. The men refuse. They will go no farther east. For the first time, Alexander faces an enemy he cannot outflank, cannot outfight. The will of his own soldiers. He rages, he pleads, he threatens. But the silence of thousands weighs heavier than any army of elephants. At last, with fury in his heart, he consents to turn back. India lies ahead, vast and unconquered, yet unseen. For Alexander, it is a wound that never fully heals. For the men, it is salvation. For you, it is the realization that even the greatest of conquerors is bound, not only by enemies and landscapes, but by the limits of those who follow him. The march home begins, but destiny, like the rivers of India, is never straight. The sound of rain fades, replaced by a dry, crackling silence. The monsoon clouds vanish behind you as the army turns westward. At first, there is relief. Men believe they are marching home at last. But the path Alexander chooses is not one of ease. To return, he leads you into the Gedrosian Desert, a wasteland of searing sun and endless dunes, where the earth itself seems to conspire against survival. The desert is not merely hot. It is punishing, merciless, a place where the air steals water from your lungs before you can swallow it. By midday, the sand burns through leather soles, and men march half dreaming, stumbling as though drunk. Packs of camels collapse, tongues swollen, their loads scattering like bones across the shifting landscape. You begin to envy even their deaths, for they no longer thirst. Alexander rides among the ranks, refusing comfort, sharing in the torment. You watch him pour away water in front of the men when offered, a gesture meant to inspire loyalty, though it makes some whisper that he is mad. Still, his presence is a kind of shield. Each time you feel your legs give way, you catch sight of him in the shimmering distance, a figure of defiance against the sun, and somehow you keep moving. Days blend into one another. Food dwindles to scraps, water to drops. Men gnaw on leather straps, chew sand-dry roots, lick dew from their shields at dawn. The desert plays tricks on your senses. Mirages rise like promises. Pools of blue water, orchards heavy with fruit, the faces of those you left behind. You reach for them only to grasp more sand. And yet, even here, Alexander pushes forward with purpose. He claims that the desert itself is a trial set by the gods, a furnace in which his army will be remade. Historians still debate whether this was strategy or stubborn pride. Did he deliberately choose the most brutal path to harden his legacy, or was it the reckless gamble of a man unwilling to seem weak? Either way, the cost is staggering. Thousands collapse, never rising again, their bones swallowed by the dunes. One day, a small flask of water is brought to Alexander. His lips are cracked, his skin blistered. But instead of drinking, he pours it onto the sand. The men gasp, outraged, but then fall silent. In that act, he tells them, "If they thirst, so will he." It is both madness and genius, the kind of gesture only he would dare. You feel a grim respect, though part of you wonders if you'd rather have seen him drink. At least then, one of you might live. Night offers little relief. The desert does not cool so much as it shifts its cruelty. Winds howl across the dunes, stinging your face with sand. Fires sputter and die. Food supplies rot, and exhaustion gnaws at every thought. Yet, in that darkness, under skies smeared with more stars than you have ever seen, Alexander speaks of destiny again. He points westward, promising that Babylon, Persia, even Greece will see them return, not as exiles, but as conquerors crowned by survival. His voice steadies the men, though their bodies weaken each day. You dream of rivers, of figs, of cool marble halls. But each dawn is the same, another march, another line of the fallen. The desert consumes all, and you feel yourself shrinking inside, less a soldier than a shadow moving across endless sand. And then, almost impossibly, the land changes. The dunes give way to scrub, scrub to pasture, and pasture to villages. Survivors stagger into these oases like spirits resurrected. The people stare in awe and terror at the army that should have perished, and yet still follows its king. Out of tens of thousands, only a fraction remain. You are one of them. You do not know whether to feel lucky or cursed. Alexander himself looks thinner, harsher, as though the desert carved him into something harder. He speaks little, but when he does, his words burn with a new intensity. You realize he has not been broken by the desert. He has been reforged by it. The Gedrosian March becomes legend, not just for its suffering, but for the proof that Alexander could lead men through the impossible and emerge alive. For you, it is something quieter, the knowledge that you can endure more than you thought possible, that survival itself can feel like conquest. But survival does not erase the scars. You carry them in your bones, in your dreams, in the hollow spaces left by those who never walked out of the desert. And though the army now tastes relief, you sense a growing unease. For Alexander, the march westward is not the end. It is only another turn in a path that no mortal can truly walk forever. The desert is finally behind you, but its ghost lingers in every scar and sun-bleached memory. Villages bloom again along the path, rivers flow, and the men eat real food without sand in it, though a few laugh that they miss the crunch. You march westward with fewer comrades than when you began, yet Alexander's vision seems undimmed. If anything, the hardships of the Gedrosian March have sharpened his hunger. Babylon welcomes him not as a weary survivor, but as a god returned. The city dazzles with its hanging gardens, fragrant markets, and streets lined with people eager to see the man who conquered the world, or nearly so. For a moment, the men swell with pride, drunk on the cheers of strangers. You too feel a thrill, standing in the shadow of temples that seem to scrape the sky. This, you think, is what all the pain was for. But Alexander is not here to rest. He speaks of new campaigns, new horizons. Arabia calls to him with its deserts and treasures. Carthage, still distant, flickers in his imagination. He talks of building fleets, of turning the Mediterranean into his personal lake. At councils, he unfurls maps so vast they seem more dream than geography. His voice glows with a certainty that both inspires and terrifies. And yet, you see cracks. He drinks more than before, his temper quicker, his nights longer. Friends whisper that he is haunted by the men lost in India, by Hephaestion, by visions of what cannot be conquered. Some nights you hear him pacing outside, muttering as though in argument with unseen gods. The soldiers too notice. Their adoration has not vanished, but it has soured into something complicated, awe tangled with unease. The court in Babylon swells with wealth and intrigue. Alexander hosts feasts where Greek generals sit beside Persian nobles, where music from every corner of the empire mixes into a cacophony of cultures. To some, it feels like the birth of a new world. To others, it is betrayal, the blurring of what it means to be Greek, Macedonian, or Persian. You sit at these feasts, dazzled by gold plates and endless wine, yet you feel the tension humming beneath every toast. And then there are the omens. Priests murmur of strange portents, eclipses, sudden storms, birds flying in eerie patterns. One night, a lion escapes its cage in the palace menagerie, rampaging through the gardens before being brought down. The whispers grow louder. The gods are restless. Alexander laughs at such talk, but you notice his eyes linger on the shadows afterward, as if listening for something only he can hear. He tries to push forward, planning, always planning. Ships are ordered, supplies gathered, envoys sent. He declares that Arabia will be the next jewel in his crown, the next step toward eternity. His words burn bright, but the men around him seem dimmer, drained. You hear them mutter, "We cannot march forever. Let us go home." One evening, Alexander hosts a grand banquet. The hall shimmers with torchlight, the air thick with smoke and laughter. He raises his cup higher than all others, his voice booming with promises of glory still to come. You drink too, but the wine tastes strange, heavy on the tongue. Perhaps it is only exhaustion. Perhaps not. Historians still debate what follows, whether the gods intervened, whether poison found its way into his cup, or whether illness simply struck down even the greatest of men. But in those days, as the feast ends and Alexander stumbles away, you feel the first chill of something ending. The conqueror who faced mountains, deserts, elephants, and empires may now face an enemy no army can defeat. The banquet's torches gutter out, but their smoke seems to linger in your lungs. At first, no one notices. Alexander has always drunk heavily, always pushed his body further than human limits. So, when he collapses into his chambers with flushed cheeks and a feverish sheen, the court murmurs but does not panic. By morning, though, the murmurs turn to whispers. His voice is weaker, his steps unsteady. Day by day, the great engine of his body begins to falter. At first, he insists on standing, commanding officers, issuing orders for the Arabian campaign. He waves away servants, declaring he is merely tired. But you see the truth. His skin clammy, his breath shallow, his once bright eyes dulled by a haze of pain. Rumors scatter through the palace like frightened birds. Some say poison, others speak of curses, the gods demanding payment for his pride. Historians still debate it, whether it was wine-tainted disease from the marshes, or the weight of exhaustion finally collapsing the frame of a man who thought himself immortal. You sit outside his chamber with other soldiers, straining to catch sounds within, coughing, low groans, the shuffle of physicians desperate to appear competent. They bring herbs, oils, prayers. None help. Each day he weakens until the once unshakable conqueror can no longer lift his own cup. And yet, his will remains. He demands to be carried on a couch so he can oversee sacrifices, so he can be seen by his men. Word spreads that Alexander lies dying, and the soldiers, thousands upon thousands, beg to see him one last time. The palace corridors fill with a line of men stretching endlessly, each waiting for a glimpse. Too weak to speak, Alexander raises only his eyes and his hand as they pass, and you are among them. When your turn comes, you meet his gaze, fevered, hollow, but still burning with that familiar intensity. He says nothing, but you feel it. He is still Alexander, even here, even now. The court becomes a storm of uncertainty. Who will rule when he is gone? He has no clear heir. His child is unborn. Generals circle like wolves, each calculating, each whispering in corners. The empire, vast and glittering, feels suddenly fragile, as if it exists only because one man willed it into being. Without him, what then? You hear a story whispered later that someone asked him to whom he left his empire, and that with a faint breath he replied, "To the strongest." Others claim he named his unborn son, or that he said nothing at all, merely staring into the distance. No one can agree. Perhaps he left no answer, because no answer could ever satisfy. The days blur, fever rages, his voice dwindles to murmurs no one can catch. Priests crowd the room, chanting, scattering incense until the air is thick with smoke. Some claim they hear him speaking to unseen gods, arguing as he once did before battle. You remember him in India, staring at the horizon like a man who saw farther than anyone else. Now he stares at nothing, or at something beyond your sight. And then, as swiftly as a storm that has spent itself, silence falls. The conqueror who crossed mountains and oceans, who faced down kings and elephants, lies still. You wait for him to rise, to laugh, to defy death itself. But he does not. The palace is thrown into chaos. officers shouting, servants weeping, the army outside wailing like one body torn in half. You sit in the corner, numb, staring at the space where Alexander breathed his last. The man who seemed larger than life has proven mortal after all, yet his absence feels unreal, as though he has merely stepped into another room. Outside, Babylon continues. Markets bustle, children play, the Euphrates flows on, indifferent. But in the hearts of those who marched with him, a silence echoes louder than any victory. The question remains, what happens when the man who held the world together is gone? You do not know. None of you do. You only know that something vast has ended, and something darker, more uncertain, has begun. The silence after Alexander's death doesn't last long. It cannot. An empire like his, sprawling, stitched together by charisma, fear, and sheer will, was never built to outlive him. You watch it unravel almost immediately, threads snapping one after another. First comes the funeral. His body, or what remains of it, lies in state while arguments rage over where it should rest. Macedonia, the land of his birth, clamors for it. Egypt, the jewel of his conquest, demands it. Babylon itself, where he died, feels entitled. His generals bicker with increasing ferocity, each seeing the body not as a relic of grief, but as a prize, a symbol of legitimacy. The corpse of the man who conquered the world becomes the most contested possession in it. The army waits for direction. They murmur in the camps, asking who will lead them now. Alexander left no clear heir. His son, Alexander IV, is unborn, and his half-brother Aridaeus is weak of mind. Some officers press for joint rule, a regency until the child can grow. Others scoff, unwilling to place their fates in the hands of an infant or a man who cannot command. The tension crackles, like the air before a storm. Historians still debate whether Alexander deliberately left the question open, daring his successors to prove themselves, or whether fate simply caught him unprepared. Whatever the truth, his silence is lethal. Soon the generals, once bound by loyalty, now free of his shadow, begin carving up the empire like scavengers at a feast. Ptolemy seizes Egypt. Seleucus lays claim to Persia. Antigonus eyes Asia Minor. Lysimachus, Thrace. Cassander, Macedonia itself. They call themselves guardians, satraps, protectors, but you see the truth. They are kings in all but name, and they will spill rivers of blood to defend their slices. You are swept into the current of this chaos. Some soldiers pledge to one general, some to another, old comrades suddenly on opposite sides of the battlefield. The dream of unity dissolves faster than sand in the Euphrates. You stand in a campfire's glow, listening to men curse the endless wars ahead. They whisper that Alexander's empire, so vast and sudden, was doomed the moment it was born, too big to hold, too fragile to last. And yet, pieces of him remain. Greek cities rise in Bactria, in Egypt, in lands where no Greek had ever set foot before. Coins bear his face, temples honor his name. Stories of his deeds spread farther than his armies ever marched. Even fractured, the empire carries his ghost. One night, as you sit beneath Babylon's stars, you recall a moment long ago, crossing the Hellespont, the sea whispering promises of glory. You had believed in him then, in the impossible. You believed again when elephants thundered across Indian fields, when the desert nearly swallowed you whole, when his gaze turned mountains into pebbles. Now, with his generals tearing each other apart, you wonder what he would think. Would he rage? Would he laugh? Would he say this was always the way of things, that empires crumble, but legends do not? The wars continue, and you march again, though the cause feels different now. You no longer fight for one man's dream, but for fragments of it, each splinter duller than the whole. The soldiers know it too. They fight because it is what they do, because to return home after so long feels impossible. The world has changed them. They are strangers to the soil that birthed them. Still, Alexander's name lingers on every tongue. Generals invoke it. Poets sing it, enemies curse it. Even in death, he commands more attention than the living. You realize, with a kind of weary awe, that this was his true conquest. Not land, not cities, not thrones, but memory itself. He seized history and bent it to his will, and now you, one among thousands, carry it forward. The empire fractures, but the legend only grows. The wars rage on, lines redrawn, crowns seized and lost. But in the quiet moments, around campfires, in marketplaces, in the whispers of travelers, you hear one name rise above all the rest. Alexander. No title needed. He is not merely remembered, he is inhabited, carried like a living presence across continents. Children play at being him, merchants tell tales of his impossible marches, priests weave his feats into prophecy. He is gone, yet impossibly present. You walk through cities he founded, Alexandria upon Alexandria, each one a thread in the tapestry he imagined. In their streets, Greek mingles with Persian, with Egyptian, with tongues you cannot name. The mingling feels both chaotic and wondrous, an echo of his dream of unity. Statues of him stand tall, eyes forever fixed on distant horizons. Some are crude copies, others masterpieces, but all share the same expression. Not triumph, but hunger. Always hunger. You remember him as flesh, the sweat of battles, the laughter at feasts, the crack of his temper, the brilliance of his gaze. Yet already he feels like myth, reshaped by each retelling. Was he a god among men, or simply a man who refused to accept limits? Historians still debate it, and perhaps they always will. But for you, the answer doesn't matter. You lived it. You marched in his shadow. You felt the fire of his will pulling you onward when your own strength had failed. Years pass, and you find yourself older, slower, carrying scars that ache when the weather turns. The empire he built is gone in its original form, divided into kingdoms that squabble like children. But the world itself is changed forever. Ideas, languages, art, and trade flow across lands that once stood apart, and in every connection, you glimpse his invisible hand. Sometimes, late at night, you dream of those first days, the crash of waves at the Hellespont, the laughter of comrades who never saw the deserts, the rush of wind as horses thundered into battle. In those dreams, he is there again, young, unbroken, eyes fixed on a horizon that only he can see. You wake with tears in your eyes, though you cannot say whether they are for him or for the person you once were, following him into the unknown. Now, as you sit beneath the stars, you let the memories drift. The sound of campfires is gone, replaced by the hum of the night, soft and steady. You think of how small each of you truly were, just men, just fragile bodies walking across vast landscapes. And yet, through Alexander's vision, you touch something that felt eternal. The stories will outlive you. Children not yet born will hear them. Poets not yet conceived will shape them. Alexander's empire may have fractured, but his legend has only grown stronger, a beacon flickering endlessly across time. And you, who once marched in his ranks, are part of that legend, even if no one remembers your name. So you close your eyes, letting the images fade, mountains, deserts, rivers, battles, and feasts, until all that remains is the steady rhythm of breath, the quiet murmur of history folding itself into sleep. The fire of conquest cools into embers. The clamor of armies dissolves into silence. The journey has ended. The world has changed. And you, weary traveler, can finally rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.